In this video, I'm going to talk about why Xingqiu is one of the best characters in the entire game. We'll be taking a dive into his key talents and constellations, comparisons to Yelan, and his general build. Stick around until the end where I break down some of his best teams and do a rotation demonstration on floor 12 in the current Abyss. My name is Anchovies and I make content centered around guides, analyses, and lore. Without further ado, let's get into it. His signature talent is his Elemental Burst. Casting it summons Hydra Rain swords that orbit around him and alternates between firing 2 and 3 swords once every second when the active character does a normal attack. Lasting 15 seconds with a 20-second cooldown and costing 80 energy, his burst is great at applying Hydra consistently and is beneficial across most Hydra reaction-based teams. The Rain swords I mentioned earlier can also be created after casting his elemental skill. These swords are useful as they provide damage reduction that scales with his skill's talent level alongside increased resistance to interruption. Its damage reduction increases by up to an additional 24% based on a portion of Xingqiu's Hydra damage bonus. And if you thought that was all, his Rain swords can also heal the active character based on Xingqiu's max HP upon shattering or expiring. Do note that if you cast his Elemental Burst, these Rain swords actually won't shatter, which is really useful for his defensive utility. By having the ability to deal damage and provide application off-field, damage reduction and interruption resistance, and minor healing, Xingqiu is one of the best characters to have even at C0. While his kit is strong at a base level, having him at high constellations only makes him more valuable. His best constellations are his Constellation 6 and Constellation 2. Xingqiu C2 extends his burst duration by 3 seconds, making it last 18 seconds instead of 15 seconds. Additionally, enemies hit by his burst Rain Sword attacks have their Hydra resistance decreased by 15% for 4 seconds. With its increased uptime and resistance shred, Xingqiu's Elemental Burst increases all Hydra related damage. His C6 allows his Elemental Burst to fire an additional enhanced sword attack, making its attack pattern 2-3-5 instead of 2-3. Every third attack also regenerates 3 energy for Xingqiu, and on average you'll gain about 12 energy per rotation through this method. Having this energy restoration lowers his energy needs by around 30-40% depending on his weapon choice and team composition. This lowered requirement allows Xingqiu to build more offensively through his weapons or artifact stats. Now, a common comparison made is whether Xingqiu or Yelan is better. They both provide off-field single-target Hydro damage and application and can flex in similar team archetypes. The main difference between the two is the utility they offer. Xingqiu provides more application and defensive utility through his Rain Swords, while Yelan offers slightly more team DPS through her Ascension 1's HP increase and Ascension 4's ramping damage buff. In solo Hydro, Xingqiu is often the superior pick simply due to his high application through his orbitals and coordinated attacks. Yelan in solo Hydro, while usable, runs into application issues where either she can't maintain the Hydro aura on enemies, or on certain bosses like the newest boss for example, where she shoots at the enemy but not the areas to break the shield. These problems can be alleviated through methods like using Hydra-related reactions to maintain the Hydra aura. However, in Dendro teams, this becomes a more noticeable issue as her Dendro core generation is slightly inferior to Xingqiu's. While they have their personal use cases, using them together is actually better than just one or the other. By pairing them together, not only do you have strong Hydra application with their bursts, but they grant buffs to the team while compensating for their differences. This makes teams like Double Hydra who Tau Vape very strong, especially in single target scenarios. Another upside to running Double Hydra is that it lowers both of their energy requirements, allowing them to run more offensive builds more comfortably. For artifacts, 4-piece Emblem of Severed Fate is his go-to set as its 2-piece provides energy and its 4-piece increases his burst damage based on energy, making it pretty much perfect for him. You can opt for 2-piece variations of Hydra damage and ER, or 4-piece Noblesse Oblige in teams where no one in the team is using it and the attack buff will be much appreciated. Oftentimes you'll run an ER Sans, Hydra Damage Goblet, and Crit Circlet, but you can swap to an Attack Sans if you have enough energy recharge. Pre-C6, Xingqiu will often need on average around 200 energy at a baseline. Therefore, a highly refined Sacrificial Sword or Favonius Sword are his preferred weapon choices. Both weapons have an energy recharge stat and have passes that alleviate Xingqiu's energy needs. Favonius specifically is useful for both his and his team's energy restoration since its passive proc creates clear particles instead of elemental ones. Amanoma is also usable as its passive grants flat energy after casting an Elemental Burst. Since it's a craftable Inazuma weapon, getting it to R5 is more accessible compared to previous weapon choices. While Xingqiu can only get 1 stack of the passive, the 12 flat energy at R5 effectively lowers his energy requirements by the same amount as a C6 does, making this weapon a really good choice pre-C6. And for a quick reference of his general energy needs, here's a chart showing the requirements for Favonius, Sac Sword at high refinements, Amanoma, and other weapon choices. Outside of these and other energy recharge stat weapons, weapons with attack or crit stats are also viable given you have enough energy to burst every rotation. Such weapons provide Xingqiu with more personal damage at the cost of needing to work around his energy requirements. These weapons become even more viable when he's at C6, where energy becomes less of an issue. Now let's get into Xingqiu's best teams. Xingqiu can be used in most Hydra-related teams as his application is a major focal point in them. One of his best team archetypes is any Bloom-based team. This includes Hyper Bloom, Bloom, and Burgeon. Damage from these reactions affect enemies once every 0.5 seconds. Because of its low damage cooldown, quickly generating seeds consistently is a necessity for these teams to thrive. Thankfully, Xingqiu provides enough Hydra application to perform this task. Outside of Xingqiu, these teams require at least one Dendro applicator for the Dendro cores and a unit to trigger the Bloom type needed. For Bloom, this would be of course Nilou. In Burgeon, Toma is the best option with Bennett-Kazuha combo being viable, especially if you have Kazuha at C2. For Hyper Bloom, it's between Cookie Shinobu and Raiden Shogun. Cookie provides healing but requires players to be close to enemies due to her elemental skills Ring AoE, and has shorter uptime without her Constellation 2. Conversely, Raiden provides no defensive utility and has a very limited AoE in her skill, but can trigger from farther distances with ease. The last slot is a flex slot for any unit depending on your needs. An example of a Bloom-based team, and in this case we'll use Hyper Bloom, is Nahida, Baizhu or Yaoyao, Xingqiu, and Raiden Shogun. Nahida being the core Dendro unit provides the strong Dendro application needed to set up Bloom core generation. Baizhu or Yaoyao act as a second Dendro with their purpose being defensive utility through healing. Baizhu specifically provides both healing and minor resistance to interruption that can help in content with stronger enemies. Xingqiu is of course here to apply Hydro for Dendro cores, and Raiden Shogun is used over Cookie since we already have defensive utility with our second Dendro pick. The next team is Vape. This team features a Pyro DPS, Xingqiu, and 2 flex slots. In such teams, if you have Yelan, you can also do double Hydro Vape with the last unit as a flex. However, this isn't a necessity if you don't want to. An example of a Vape team is Yoimiya, Xingqiu, Yelan, and Zhongli or Yunjin. Zhongli provides Yoimiya with a shield, allowing her to do her entire normal attack sequence without getting interrupted. Meanwhile, Xingqiu and Yelan provide off-field Hydra application, defensive utility through Xingqiu's rain swords, and Yelan's damage ramping buff for Yoimiya. And of course, Yoimiya is the on-field power unit dealing Vape damage to breeze through single target content with ease. Next up is Taser and Soup teams. These teams consist of Xingqiu, at least one Electro and Animo unit, and a flex slot for either a Pyro enabler or another Electro or Animo unit. One of the most popular Taser or Soup teams includes Xingqiu, Beidou, Fischl, and Sucrose. Beidou and Xingqiu, especially at higher constellations, provide enough defensive utility through Beidou's Constellation 1 shield and Xingqiu's sword orbitals to not need healing in most cases where this team is used. Additionally, they, alongside Fischl, provide off-field damage and application. Sucrose's purpose is to be the driver of the team as she constantly swirls Hydro and Electro to buff everyone's damage. Her Elemental Mastery increase and C6 absorption buff passively increases Electrocharge reaction damage as well. Now, a team that some may be concerned about is Freeze. While Xingqiu can work in Freeze, the main problem is that Xingqiu is a very single target heavy character. His rain swords can only really hit in an AoE if enemies are close enough to each other to where his rain swords can actually hit the enemy next to the other one. Regardless, Freeze's high preference for AoE content makes it to where Xingqiu is less priority pick compared to people like Kokomi or Mona. However, if he's one of the only few Hydra options that you have, then he is somewhat usable in these teams. An example of like a Freeze team that you could run with Xingqiu is something like Ayaka, Diona, Xingqiu, and Kazuha. Ayaka of course acts as the on-field DPS for Freeze as she is a really great Freeze DPS. Diona is there to provide shielding and some extra healing just in case, and adding her as a second Crow unit allows for the Crow Resonance, which increases crit rate, which passively increases Ayaka's damage. Xingqiu of course is there for the Hydra application, but also through his rain swords provides some defensive utility on top of Diona's. And then Kazuha is of course the Animo buffer for VV Shred alongside his elemental damage bonus buff. Alright, so now that we've reached the end of this video, I'm now going to do a rotation demonstration, and for this case, we're going to be going ahead and showing the Yoimiya team. So this team is going to feature Yoimiya, Xingqiu, Yelan, and Zhongli. If you reached until the end of this video, then thank you so much for watching, and if you did enjoy, then be sure to subscribe for more Genshin content. And without further ado, let's get on to the rotation demonstration. So, till the next video, bye-bye.
Solidified!
Get my sword! Firehead! Impertinent fool! Be gone! This body belongs to us. Things are about to get done. Let me lead you
Consider it. Did I scare you? I can still.
Quietly now. Here comes the catch. Ring cutter. Huh?